Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Living Manna Church. Hi, I'm Pastor Dave Sain, Senior Shepherd here at Living Manna. It's Wednesday night, and for us, that means Bible study. Thank you so much, guys, for hanging out with me tonight. I really, really appreciate it. It's Wednesday night. We've got a neat Bible study for you guys. We've been in the subject of the pattern for a while. We're going to continue with that today. We're going to do a little sub-subject, if you would. It's going to go for a couple of weeks, but some really, really interesting stuff to get into. But before I do that, let me just get rid of some commercials, get some of the information out of the way. This is the first time that you're hanging out with us tonight. Please, please, please subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. Certainly hit the bell so that you're notified every time that we go live. There's a whole bunch of other studies that we have. We invite you to download the LMC app. That's the Living Manna Church app. You can go to your Google Play Store or your App Store. Just type in Living Manna Church. It's the blue L&M logo. You can download it for free, and that'll get you right into all of the different messages, all the different studies. We do stuff every single day. We've got a daily devotion that goes out called Morning Manna every single day. On Friday nights, my dear brother Max and I, we get together. We just have a conversation about the things of Yah. And, of course, here on Wednesday night Bible study and our Shabbat services. All of that is available on our app, also on our website. If you go to livingmanna.org, you can certainly get all that information there if you just have a computer. But most of us have smartphones and iPads, et cetera, you can download all that information and be part of what we do. And if you are blessed by what we do, if you're encouraged by what we do, if you're learning stuff as we go through all of our different studies and sermons and teachings, et cetera, we ask you to be part of the giving here at LMC. Help us to do what we do. Help us to get this message out. We appreciate all of your giving, all of the blessings that you send our way. Thank you so much in advance. You can do that right on the app. A whole bunch of information as how you can do that is available right on the app there. But we thank you in advance. You make it possible for us to be on the air, to continue to do what we do. and to give these sort of teachings out. And if you know somebody else that is really interested in some biblical truth and is really starting to see things a little bit differently, tell them about LMC. We appreciate that. Tell them about us. Send them a morning devotion. Send them one of the studies so that they can listen, and hopefully they can be part of the LMC family as well. So wherever you guys happen to be, please, if you're watching us on YouTube, please log in. Let us know where you're from. Be part of the chat. Let us know what's happening. And if you're part of our chat, because inside of our actual app, there is actually a chat room called Manna Eaters. Give us a shout out. Let us know where you are. Shout out there. Give us a shout out on YouTube. Just say hello. Let us know where you're watching from. And let's get ready. Let's get ready to open up Yah's Word and get into this Bible study. I think that's all the commercials. Actually, you know what? I do have a couple of more commercials. I'm not going to do it now. We're going to save it for this weekend. But the fall feasts are right around the corner. Right? I can't believe it. The fall feasts are literally right around. It feels like we just did Passover, but the fall feasts are here. The cycle that Abba has given us to understand who he is and what his redemptive plan is moving on no matter what. And so we have a whole bunch of information for you. It's actually available in the app. If you go to the calendar section, it'll tell you all about what we're doing for the fall feast. But we'll let you guys know verbally as well this upcoming Shabbat, this upcoming Saturday at our service. Okay. I think that's all the commercials for today. Let's open up with a word of prayer and let's just jump right into this study. Abba, as we always say, give us eyes to see, ears to hear, and a heart that's willing to obey. In the Master's name, amen and amen. Okay, so we've been in the study for a little while now called The Pattern, right? That's been sort of the general topic and title for a lot of what we've been doing. But if you're just joining us, certainly you can listen to any study you want and just jump right in. But all of these studies are connected. All of them help us from study to study, and not just Wednesdays, but what we do in Hidden Manna, what we do on Saturdays. It's all normally, not always, but normally it's interconnected, especially this stuff that we've been talking about for a little while now, this idea of the mystery language, this idea of understanding Abba's word, the secret, the mystery things that Abba has given to us. And so we're going to start a little, I guess you could say, a sub-subject to the idea of the pattern. This absolutely is in line with all the patterns we've been talking about. We're going to talk about the pattern of the temple. And really, that is a huge topic. There's no way we're going to get done with it today. We're going to probably pick it up this upcoming Friday night with Brother Max. But really, really important topic. So I absolutely suggest you listen to the previous studies to help you get a little bit of the background. It'll make what we're doing now, what we're talking about now, be that much more easily understood. But the title and the topic for today, let me pop this up so you guys can see it. The title and the topic for today is called The Temple. Now, this is part one, and each week we'll name it something a little bit different, but it'll be part one, part two, part three. This is really a huge topic to get into. There's so many different directions that we can go with this. And so tonight's, I guess, a little bit of an introduction to it, but this is part of the overall teaching of the patterns that we've been talking about, because Abba's word is full of patterns. Now, we say patterns, and that's the overall topic of all of this, but really it's Abba's language, right? It's how Abba speaks to us. And I guess ultimately, not only is the information important that we're going to share throughout all of these studies, but what's equally important is that you learn the language, is that you begin to familiarize yourself with how Abba speaks. And once you do, and of course, beloved, we always need to be asking. We always need to be praying, as we do every time we get together, for eyes to see, for ears to hear, and for a heart that's willing to obey. What you're actually asking for when you say that is you're asking for Abba's spirit. You're asking for Abba to open up your mind, open up your understanding, open up your eyes. And beloved, believe me, he will. But it takes time. It takes time. It takes study. It takes preparation. But before you know it, Abba begins to open up truth to you. And so we're going to share some really, at least what I think are some interesting and important things. And without any further ado, let's jump into the study. You can see right there on the picture, that is obviously a picture of the what's called the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. And I picked it because you can see all the stones that are just sort of sitting there and you know, just piled up, and you've got the big cornerstone there. And we're going to get into all of that information in the upcoming weeks. But I thought just a real interesting picture to kind of sort of capsulize the thought, because we're going to talk about the temple, but we're going to talk about the temple in very, very different ways than perhaps you've ever heard it before. We're going to talk about it prophetically. We're going to talk about what it means spiritually. Yes, we're going to get into some of the history. That's always interesting to get into the history. But this is not just about history. This is not just about facts and figures. The whole idea of what we are doing is to understand why we do what we do, or to understand what it is that Abba is doing and where our place in all of this is. So that's really our goal. This isn't just a historical study to tell you how the temple runs. Guys, there's plenty of teachers out there that can do all that kind of stuff for you. Lots of them out there. And you can just go online and get all that information. But at some point, we've got to go beyond that and understand what the story is. So without any further ado, here we go. Let me make the screen a little bit bigger. The temple. The temple. Okay, so here's our opening verse for today. Really familiar. We've traveled this road before. We're going to travel it again, and I'm sure multiple times in the future. We're going to look at Matthew chapter 24. But here are the words of the Master concerning the temple. Now, this is after the Master rides in, prior to the Passover, the whole of what we call the triumphal entry. Comes in on a donkey. All that stuff happens. Well, prior to the what winds up being the last meal of the Master, he has a conversation with his disciples about the temple, and obviously the temple was the center of all Jewish life, right? You came from all over the world, all over the known world, that is, to come for Passover, to come for Shavuot, to come for tabernacles. And the center of everything that was there, the center of your worship. If you were to ask people in the first century, where is Elohim? Quite honestly, they just point to the temple. Say, well, he's there. He's there. That's the temple. His throne is there. Even though by the time of the first century, there is no more ark that's in the inner workings of the temple. But that's another story for another day. But here is what the Master says when the disciples question him about the glory. And it must have been glorious to see the temple. Now, this obviously is not the first temple. The temple that Solomon built has already been destroyed. There's been a renewed temple by the time Nehemiah comes around. A new temple winds up getting built. And at some point, Herod winds up refurbishing or rebuilding what was that second temple. And so that's what's there about the time that Yeshua comes, about the time that the Master's on the scene. It's what's called the second temple, but it's really a refurbished temple from Nehemiah's day. Obviously, beautiful. They put a lot of work, obviously a lot of gold and silver and precious jewels and et cetera in it. It must have been a sight to behold. And so here they are in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 1. Again, really, really familiar verses, but bear with me. It says the following. And going out, Yeshua went away from the set-apart place, and his taught ones came near to point out to him the buildings of the set-up. So it's not just the temple. There's the temple. There's the Hall of Judgment. There's Solomon's Court. There's a whole bunch of other buildings around the temple. But obviously, the main thought here is the temple. Pointed out to him the buildings of the set-apart place. Verse 2, and Yeshua said to them, do you not see all these? So he's pointing out to everything that's there, everything that is the temple complex of his day. And he says, truly. Now again, remember, for everybody that's been part of our previous studies, truly means amen, right? So he's the faithful witness, the amen witness, Emmanuel. So truly, I say to you, not one stone shall be left upon another at all, which shall not be thrown down. And of course, just for pictorial effect, you've got the picture right there. So you get an idea of what he's talking about. Obviously, this happens around 70 AD with the destruction of the temple. And then later on, the whole destruction of Jerusalem. So this, to you and I, we're looking back in history. But from the apostles' perspective, from the master's perspective, he's telling them what is to come. All right, so very, very familiar verse. I know you guys are familiar with it. Let's take a look at this. We've been talking about for a while now, again, via our weekend services, our Shabbat services, even with Brother Max. We've been talking about the mystery language. And I know it's very, very different from what you've been told, right? I know it's very, very different from what the majority certainly of the Gentile religious world, but even among the Hebrew roots, even among Messianic or Torah observant, whatever title you want to give us, the Netzarim, very different from what you might hear from some. But I hope as we go through this, you're going to see the validity of it in the explanation of these things, in the verses that we go over. So there's a hidden language, a hidden tongue, if you will, which really just changes everything that we know in Acts chapter 2. A hidden or mystery language or tongue that Abba has been speaking right from the beginning, ever since he spoke to Moses. But now that the Master, now that Yah's salvation, that Yeshua has come, that language is for the first time, and this is really important that you get this. This language for the first time is being interpreted, is being understood, not only obviously by the Master, but is being understood by the disciples. And Abba is eventually going to give his Spirit to those who truly do come, who are the called, who are the chosen. And Abba is going to open up our eyes and our understanding to know, to see, to hear, and to obey the things that he's talking about, the things that are the hidden manners of Abba. So just to give you a little background, I know we went over these verses before, but this is important that we see this. Here's Matthew chapter 13, where Messiah is explicitly telling us about a mystery language, about things that are hidden, about a way that Abba has spoken that nobody has understood until Messiah comes, because Messiah is hearing from Abba. Abba is speaking to him in a way that no one has been spoken to before, not even Moses. Messiah, as the prophet like Moses to come, is showing us things we had no concept, no idea of before, because we were blind to it. But you and I, 2,000 years later, we should not be blind to these things. Unfortunately, many of us are. But here we go. So here's Matthew chapter 13 and verse 11. And it says, and he answering said to them, so they ask him, why do you speak in parables? That's sort of the question that starts all of this. He says, because it has been given to you to know the secrets. Now, the PDP version is in yellow, and really, really pay close attention to all the PDP versions here. They're going to really help you understand sort of the story, the storyline of what's going on. So he says, it's been given to you to know the secrets, i.e., the mystery tongue, the language of the Spirit, or the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. They all mean the same thing. They're all talking about the same idea. So he says, because to them, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, even the people around them, he's speaking in parables to continue to hide the mysteries of the kingdom, while speaking them at the same time. But speaking them in such a way that if you don't have eyes to see, you don't have ears to hear, you have no idea what he's really talking about. He goes on, the kingdom of heaven, but to them, meaning the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the religious leaders, to them it has not been given. It has not been given to them to understand. Verse 12, and this is really important. For whoever possesses, now when he means possess, the PDP version in there, whoever understands the tongue. whoever understands the beginning of the mysteries. Whoever begins to understand the word is what he's talking about. To him, more will be given. Now, again, I put in there the PDP version to help you understand. So whoever possesses the understanding of the tongue, even the very limited beginning understanding, even the literal idea of what the tongue is about, to the person that does that, Abba will give him more understanding, and he shall have overflowingly great understanding. So the process is you start off with a literal basic understanding. Abba gives you spiritual understanding. And if you're faithful with that, Abba will give you understanding overflowingly. And beloved, you know what you should be praying for, what should be your prayer every single day when you wake up? I know we've got all sorts of things to pray for, family and friends and ailments, and our bodies hurt, and we've got all sorts of things going on. And we should pray for all of those things, no doubt. But what you should be asking for every single day is, Abba, give me eyes to see and ears to hear. Give me understanding, so that you get to the point, and that's hopefully where we're all headed, to understand overflowingly. Great understanding. The next verse here, I'm just going to put a little color here so you guys can see it. This is where we are. But whoever does not possess. So there's a spiritual situation that's being explained to us here. So when it says whoever does not possess, the PDP version I put in there to help you understand, he's saying, for those people that don't want to understand, who don't want to understand the mystery language, who are okay with just sort of the basic sort of ABCs, literal kind of understanding. For those people who do not possess, who do not want to understand the mystery language, who do not want the tongues, who do not want interpretation, who do not want a word of wisdom and word of knowledge and all those other things that go, and all of those things are given to us to understand the mysteries of the kingdom. To the person who doesn't want that, even what he possesses, what little he does know or she knows, shall be taken away from him. Guys, that is a major truth that we've got to wrap our minds around. Abba wants you to understand. He wants us to pray that prayer, help us to understand. But if you don't want to understand, if you're satisfied with just sort of the basics, if you think all you need is the basics, beloved, even what you think you know, Abba's going to take from you. Verse 13 says, and here it is, verse 13, it says, because of this, I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. So this is about understanding. This is about acknowledging, this is about comprehending things that were not previously comprehended or understood. Okay, next tile. This was just a continuation of the same chapter. Verse 14, the master says, and he's going to quote Isaiah here, and in them, meaning the people who really don't want to understand, in them, the prophecy of Isaiah is completely filled, which says, hearing you shall hear, and by no means understand. So they got the Torah. They've got the words of Moses. They got the words of the prophets. But if all they have is the literal or the understanding that the religious understanding that they have, it's not enough. Hearing you shall hear and by no means understand. And seeing you shall see and by no means perceive. For the heart, again, heart means mind, for the mind of this people has become thickened, and their ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes they have closed. So the spiritual condition of the people of the house of Israel at this time, which is a fulfillment of Isaiah, and way before Isaiah, and even today, was that they didn't want to know the spiritual things. They were okay with the literal things. They were okay with the beginning things, but even that is going to be taken away from them at some point. And their ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their heart. And this is really important. I'm going to highlight this so you guys can see it. I'm going to highlight this whole sentence here. It actually goes even beyond that. Pay attention to what this is saying. When you have eyes to see, ears to hear, when you begin to understand, because, actually, when you don't understand, but he's saying if you do this, if you begin to understand, he wants, by understanding, you turn back. And the word turn back means is teshuvah. It means to repent, to go in the opposite direction, to go back to Abba, to turn back, to repent, and I heal them. So here's a principle that I want everybody to get. I'm just gonna circle it here again. Here's the principle. What does true repentance and true healing look like? Well, here it is. He just told us. True repentance and true healing looks like, or is, when you begin to understand the mysteries, the hidden things, the tongue, the language, the hidden matters that Abba has put in his word. That's when true repentance and healing begins in all of us. I know we're told about, prayers, and all of a sudden you say the prayer and everything's just fine after that. We'll deal with that this upcoming Shabbat. That's not what the Master's telling us. Here he is telling us true repentance and true healing comes when you begin to understand. When you begin to open up your eyes to the mysteries, or when Abba begins to open up your eyes because you want your eyes open, that's when true healing begins. And of course, he's quoting Isaiah chapter 6, verses 9 through 10. I definitely encourage you, go out and look up Isaiah 6 and read that whole verse. We just don't have time to do it today. It's a good thing every time something is quoted, go back and read it. Read the verses before, the verses after. They'll help you understand. But here's verse 16. The Master goes on to say, and blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear, meaning the disciples there. For truly I say to you that many prophets and righteous ones have longed to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it. So that's to me, that's a really interesting verse, because he's talking about the prophets that came before them. And he's telling us there's information that even they were given that they couldn't really wrap their whole minds around. It's not to say that they didn't understand the literal meaning of what Abba was telling them, but they didn't understand the bigger meaning. And the bigger meaning is really what we want to really focus on, because that's the tongue. That's the mystery. That's what's hidden. That's the secret matters that Yeshua has come to make known to us. So this mystery tongue, this mystery language, these things that are hidden, the hidden matters. We're gonna cheat a little bit here, because, well, we know what they are, and we can explain them. Now, whether you see them or not is a different story. But here's the simple explanation. As there's more to it, because obviously Abba speaks in parables, and he speaks in metaphors and similes, and he speaks in numbers. He speaks in icons, in all sorts of different ways. But if we're going to really, at least in a very simple way, wrap our mind around what the mystery language is that Abba speaks, here it is in its most simple, broken down form. Abba gives us the literal letter and earthly record of whatever, the Torah, the history, the instruction. But the mystery language is to hear the literal, do the literal, understand the earthly, but then begin to understand the spiritual. And here it is up here on the notes. And I'm sorry, in fact, I don't even think that the notes are available yet in the description box, so they're only up on your screen. So if you're watching this live, I'm sorry, the notes aren't up there just yet, but later on I'll make sure PM puts them up. So if you're watching this, pre-recorded or recorded afterward, you can probably download the notes and you could follow along. But here it is. Here's the secret. I'm telling you the secret. I'm explaining to you how the language works. Abba speaks in literal terms, in earthly terms to get us to understand spiritual terms, heavenly terms, or really, I guess a better way of saying it is bigger terms. There's a literal story and there is a spiritual story, or a much bigger story. Guys, that's it in a nutshell. I know that sounds very simple, so anybody can do that. No, anybody can't. Not everybody can do it. I'm telling you, unless Abba opens up your eyes, there's stuff you just don't see, you can't understand. So there is so with regards to the temple, which is what we're talking about, there is the pattern is there is a literal temple, or really, we could say tabernacle, because that's where it starts off with Moses, and we'll get into all of this. So when the master says to the disciples, it's been given to know the mysteries of the kingdom, but many prophets, they all wanted to know, and they couldn't see. So who's he talking about? Well, to Moses, the literal temple, tabernacle, which is the subject of what we're talking about for the next few weeks, he knew that. Moses wrote about it. Solomon wrote about it, or had a lot of dealings with regards to the temple, the building of the temple of Solomon. Zechariah absolutely writes about the temple and all sorts of information surrounding it. Definitely Daniel writes about the temple and all sorts of information surrounding it. Ezekiel speaks to us about the temple. Nehemiah speaks to us about the temple. So when the master tells the disciples, many prophets have longed to see and to hear what you guys are hearing and have not, who's he talking about? Moses, Solomon, Zechariah, Daniel, Ezekiel, Nehemiah. And it's not that they didn't know anything. They knew a lot. They got to see a lot. But the understanding that Messiah, because Messiah is the first one to put the whole picture together, and then to explain to us the whole picture, and then to give us Abba's Spirit to help us after his resurrection to understand the things that we need to understand. So that's the literal. So to these guys, to Moses, Solomon, Zechariah, Daniel, Ezekiel, Nehemiah, the literal was given. The physical, the earthly was given to them. And the earthly is important. The earthly is absolutely important. The spiritual, however, the meaning that they didn't get, the understanding they couldn't wrap their minds around about the temple, about the tabernacle, in this case, the pattern that we're talking about, Yeshua is the first one to reveal these mysteries. Shaul, or Saul, or Paul, he's the next one that is given the insight to understand the mysteries. Cephas, Peter, he is also given insight into the temple. Saul's given insight into the temple. Cephas is given insight into the temple to understand the mysteries, not just the literal that Moses, Solomon, Zechariah, Daniel, Ezekiel, Nehemiah understood, but beyond that. And of course, the gospel writer John and the writer of the book of Revelation, he also understood things about the temple, the spiritual things about the temple, that even these other prophets did not understand. So we need to we're gonna connect. We're gonna go through all of these guys: Moses, Solomon, Zechariah. We're gonna touch base on all of them, and of course, at some point, not today, we're gonna talk about what Yeshua says: Shaul, Cephas, John, etc., 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 to get both the literal meaning and to get the spiritual meaning. So here is Romans chapter 7. I know it's a little bit of review for us, but let's bear with me here. Romans chapter 7 and verse 6. Now pay attention, really pay close attention to the yellow, to the PDP version, to the Pastor Dave paraphrase. Here's Shaul, and he says, but we now have been released from the Torah, meaning the curse of the Torah, the literal earthly letter of the Torah, having died to what we were held by. We were not held by the Torah. We were held by sin. We've gone over this before. So that we should serve in newness of spirit. Now, what does it mean in newness of spirit? In newness of understanding the mysteries of the Torah. Not just the letter, but the mysteries. And not in the oldness of the letter, or i.e., in the little that we know. Just like the master just said, to he that got a little but really doesn't want to know more, even what little you have will be taken away from you. But he that does have, more will be given, so that you have an abundance or overwhelmingly. Well, Saul's talking about the same thing here. He's saying so that, let me highlight this, I'm right here, so that we should serve in the newness of the Spirit in understanding the mysteries of the Torah, and not just in the oldness of the letter, which is the little that we know. Verse 12 says, so that, and I put, again, the PDP version in there so it makes a little bit more sense. So then, the Torah, the earthly to / heavenly meanings, because this is what Saul's talking, he's wrapping it all together. There's an earthly meaning, there's a spiritual meaning. And he's saying in verse 12, now I'm skipping some verses here. You can go ahead and read all the verses in Romans chapter 7, but for time, I'm skipping through. So verse 12 says, so Saul says, so then the Torah, the earthly to heavenly meanings, truly is set apart. That word set apart just means holy. So Saul's telling us the Torah, its earthly to spiritual meanings, which Saul absolutely has begun to understand, it's set apart. And the commandments that are contained in the Torah, they are holy and righteous, and they are good. Skip on down to verse 14. And here he says, for we know that the Torah is. Now, again, PDP version, it's not just that the Torah is. What Saul is saying is that we know that the Torah has always been. The little we have. The Torah has always been, or has always had, a spiritual component to it. Even though we only knew the literal, even though Daniel and Moses and such, that they understood what they understood, there's a bigger meaning, but it's always been there. It's always there. It's just whether you had eyes to see it. So verse 14 again, for we know that the Torah is, or always has been, the little that we have, it always has been spiritual. That it has always contained overwhelming or overflowing, if you want to follow what the master said in Matthew 13, the Torah has always contained overwhelming truth. But, and here's the problem, I, me, you, we are all fleshly and earthly. And as being earthly for a long time, we did not see it until Yeshua came, until Abba gives us his Spirit. And once that happens, then we begin to see. So Saul's, again, verse 14, one more time, so you guys really get this. For we know that the Torah has always been, the little that we've known, but it's always been spiritual. These mysteries have always been in every word that Moses spoke, and Solomon spoke, and Zechariah spoke, and Daniel spoke, and Ezekiel spoke, and Nehemiah spoke. There is the spiritual hidden in their words. But I'm fleshly, or we are all fleshly. They were fleshly. We're all fleshly, and we didn't see it until the Messiah comes, but we didn't see it because we were all sold under sin. So all of this, I know, is a little bit of a review for everybody, but it's important so that you understand this process or this movement throughout the Torah into the New Testament, that Messiah comes to give us an understanding of what was always there, but what was not really seen or understood by most or by many or really by few. Okay, so what is this understanding from the earthly to the spiritual, from the letter to the heavenly? Here is the book of Hebrews, chapter 7 and verse 11. Again, pay close attention to the PDP versions. It says, truly then, if perfection were through the Levitical priesthood. So he's going to give us, so whoever the writer of Hebrews is, does a bang up job of explaining how we need to interpret, how we need to understand Abba's language. So he says, truly then, if perfection were through the Levitical priesthood, i.e., the earthly, the literal, for under it the people were given the Torah, the instruction that contains, from what Paul just told us in Romans 7, the instruction always was spiritual. It always had another meaning. We just couldn't see it because we were sold into sin. We were fleshly. But if perfection could come through the Levitical priesthood, through the earthly literal, for under it the people were given the Torah, the instruction that is both heavenly and earthly, why was there still need for another, a spiritual priest to arise according to the order of Melchizedek? So this is the argument or the discussion in Romans chapter, in the whole book of Romans, but Romans 7 here. And not be called, arise a priest according to the order of Melchizedek, which is the spiritual meeting, and not be called according to the order or the earthly meaning of the Torah of Aaron. So he's comparing two priesthoods, the Aaronic priesthood, and he's comparing Messiah's priesthood of Melchizedek. And he's saying one is earthly according to how the Torah is written. It is the Levitical priesthood. But one is heavenly as well. And it's also mentioned in the Torah, but we read it, you don't really understand what's happening unless Abba gives you eyes to see. Here's verse 12. This is really important that you guys get this. This is such a huge concept that so many people today just do not get when it comes to interpreting Abba's word, when it comes to interpreting the language. Verse 12 says, for the priesthood being changed. And I highlighted the word there, put it in a little bit different color so you guys can see it. I'm just going to circle it right here. Changed. For the priesthood being changed, of necessity, there takes place a change. Now, I'm just going to read what it says in white first. Therefore takes place, or necessity, there takes place a change of the law also. So now let's read it with the PDP version. It says, for the priesthood be changed, of necessity, there takes place a change. Now I put in there in yellow, it doesn't mean a destruction of, a removal of, there is no more. It means transposition, a transferal to a heavenly truth. So let's read again. For the priesthood being changed, of necessity, there takes place a change, a transposition, a transferal to heavenly truth. There takes place a transferal from earthly truth, or the little that you know, to overwhelming truth. To he that has, more will be given, of the law also. So we go from a Levitical priesthood, an earthly priesthood, to a Melchizedek priesthood, a spiritual priesthood, which obviously is talking about Messiah. Here's the actual word, the way it appears in the Greek. This is Greek in your Strong's Concordance, number 3331. It's the word that's translated change. It is metathesis. And look at the first two meanings are really important here. It means a transposition. Not a destruction of, not an obliteration of, not a wiping out of something. It means a moving of something from one spot to another spot, from an earthly spot to a spiritual spot. It means transposition. It means transferal. It also means disestablishment. It does mean change, a removing, a translation, i.e., again, the way we said, from an earthly or a literal, or the little that you have, not one stone will be left upon another. That's the literal. To a heavenly, spiritual understanding with regards to the temple that you will have in abundance. This is what Hebrews is talking about. And unfortunately, we've kind of, in the modern religious world, we've looked at these verses, and the modern religious world has just said, well, just get rid of the Torah. The Torah has been changed. That's not what it means. It means a new aspect, a bigger aspect of the Torah. A transpositioning of the Torah has taken place. Not a removal of the Torah, not a wiping away of the Torah, a growing of the Torah, a better understanding of what was already written in the Torah that was just not understood previously. So this hopefully, with this understanding, Matthew chapter 5, verse 17, which everybody, there's all sorts of, arguments over what this means. Hopefully this sounds maybe a little bit more clear to you. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 17. It says, do not think that this is the master speaking, do not think that I came to destroy, to remove, to do away with the Torah and the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill or to complete. How? To help us move it from a literal, physical, earthly understanding to things the prophets wanted to know, but could not wrap their minds around. A transfer, to transpose, to live and explain, to translate, because it's a language. To translate a tongue that is Abba's tongue, the mysteries of the kingdom, to give you its true heavenly meaning. I hope that gives you more color into what what the master's saying in Matthew chapter 5, because I know you're going to hear all sorts of different things from all sorts of different people. But if we don't get this, if we don't get that the language goes from literal to spiritual, which we've already read in Hebrews, is exactly what it is, then we're gonna miss everything. And it's not. And you know what? And the master knew that we were going to do this. He knew we were going to make a mistake on all of this, and he spoke to it. All right, our next tile. So this idea of a transference, of transpositioning from the earthly Torah, the earthly example, to its spiritual reality, which was always there, just not understood. You have to realize Yeshua is the first person, the first man to ever understand the whole story. Nobody else understood the whole story. The master did, and he spends his time with the disciples and with everybody else that's there, that's listening, explaining that transference to them, showing us the pattern, giving us, ever go to a map sometimes, and you remember in high school, you'd be given a map, and you look at a map, and it's got all sorts of things on it. You've got no way of understanding the map until you get the little legend, the little thing on the bottom that gives you, what the measurement is, or, what the different symbols are. Messiah came to give us the legend. He came to begin to explain to us how to interpret, how to understand these things. This is important that we get. He is the first one to do this. Why? Because he is given the Spirit without measure. He understands. Abba, Father, has spoken to him. He understands. So, with that in mind, Messiah, right from the beginning, speaks in transpositional language. He speaks Abba's mystery language. And you'll notice the disciples, not only the disciples, the Pharisees, nobody gets it. Nobody understands what he's saying. And yet this is transpositional language that we must understand. Here's John chapter 2, verses 19 through 22. Very, very familiar, but now let's look at the PDP version in the yellow, understanding what we've already sort of gone over. It says, Yeshua answered and said to them, destroy this dwelling place. And by dwelling, so he's standing there in the temple, right? He's standing in the temple. So he says, destroy this dwelling place. And i.e., they're looking around and saying, oh, the temple. He's talking about the temple. Destroy this dwelling place, the temple. And in 3 days, I shall raise it up. Then the Jews, the Yehudim, said, it took 46 years to build this dwelling place. The literal earthly building that's right there in front of them that Messiah's already told us in Matthew 24, not one stone's going to remain upon another concerning it. So they're thinking the literal. That's what little they know. And if you only know a little and you're not willing to learn more, then what little you have will be taken away from you. And it was, and it is. So they say it took 46 years to build this dwelling place, the literal earthly, and you are going to raise it in 3 days. But so this is after the fact, right? So John's writing this after the fact. This isn't like he's writing this, it's not like he's, transcribing this as it's being said. He's writing this after the fact. And he says in verse 21, here it is so you guys can see it. He writes in verse 21, but he, meaning the master, spoke about, here's the PDP version. What was he speaking about? The spiritual, heavenly meaning. He was speaking about the mysteries, but he spoke about the dwelling place of his body. So there's the transposition from an earthly physical temple to a human body. That's the transposition. That's the transposition no one could see before. That's the transference no one could see before. And everything the master does, and almost everything he says, he's speaking in a transference or a transpositional type of way. He's speaking from the literal to the spiritual. And you only understand the spiritual if you can wrap your mind around the literal first. It says, but he spoke this about the dwelling place of his body. Verse 22 right here. It says, so when he was raised from the dead, because remember, he's writing this after the fact. So when he was raised from the dead, his taught ones remembered. Well, what did they remember? Or how did they remember? They remembered because the spirit of Abba had been given to them, and Abba had taught them the language. And they put the story together, both what Messiah had told them, and now the Spirit is speaking or bringing to remembrance all things. So by the Spirit, they were taught the language. He was raised from the dead. Verse 22. So when he was raised from the dead, his taught ones remembered that he said this to them. And they believed. They believed what? They believed the heavenly spiritual meaning cloaked in, hidden in the literal language of Scripture and the word which the Master had said. All the words. So it's not just this idea about the resurrection. It's not just this idea about the temple. It's all of the words that the Master said. They all began to understand the bigger picture. They all began from the day of Shavuot on. They all began to interpret the language. They all began to speak in that tongue. They all began with the gift of interpretation and word of wisdom and so forth and so on to speak the mysteries, to take the literal things that were said, not by Yeshua, but not just by Yeshua, by all the prophets, and begin to understand this is what they actually meant. This is what, though it really happened this way, this is what was actually being spoken of. Beloved, this is vital. This is vital to understanding the truth of Abba's word, to understanding what this whole story is really, really about. So that heavenly to spiritual, or that hidden part from literal from heavenly to spiritual, or from literal to earthly to heavenly to spiritual. Here's Hebrews, the writer of Hebrews again is really the best explanation of all of this. Hebrews chapter 8 and verse 1. It says, now the summary, and by summary, again, follow the PDP version. Now the summary, or the point of all of this, the point of the whole book there. Now the summary of what we are saying is this. We have such a high priest, PDP version, a high priest as is given to us in the literal Torah. But this high priest is seated at the right hand of the throne of greatness, meaning at the right hand of Abba, in the heavens. Physical truth to spiritual truth. And who serves as a priest according to the Torah, the earthly Torah, in the set-apart place, which is also explained to us in the earthly Torah, but he's not talking about the earthly heavenly place or the earthly set-apart place. He's talking about the heavenly or spiritual set-apart place or temple. It says, let me go back here to verse 2. It says, and who serves in the set-apart place and of the true or spiritual tent, and by tent it means tabernacle, again, as was given to us by Moses in the literal writing. We're now finding out there's a whole new meaning to it that was always there, but we didn't see it, which Yah set up. And we'll get into this, not today, we'll get into this probably next week. What temple did Yah set up? Well, he set up the cornerstone. He set up the foundation. And now we're going to find out, not this week, but next week, we're going to get more into this. It is Yeshua that is building the temple based on what Abba, Father, has done to set it up, giving the foundation and the cornerstone, which is the process that goes on in the literal Torah. And not man, not the earthly temple, not which the master's already said of the earthly temple, not one stone is going to remain upon another. So one is being transposed, and by transposed, destroyed, right? The temple's going to be destroyed. But its meaning, everything about it is going to be transposed into something bigger. So we're not going to lose it. We're actually going to understand it in a better way than we've ever understood it before. Verse 3 goes on to say, here it is in verse 3, for every high priest is appointed according to the Torah to offer both gifts and slaughterings, animal sacrifices. So it was also necessarily, which was hidden in the Torah, for this one, meaning the Messiah, Yeshua, who is a priest, to have somewhat to offer. So if the earthly example is there's offerings, the spiritual example is there's offerings too, but they're not exactly the same offerings. One's bigger because the spiritual is bigger, but the earthly becomes the pattern. Verse 4, right here it says for, and I put it in a different color so it really pops out at you. For if indeed he, meaning the master, were on earth. Well, he's not. He's not. At this point, he's not. Obviously, he's resurrected. He is the high priest. He's he's at the throne room of Abba. So he's not on the earth. And that's the point he's making. There's what happens on the earth. There's what's happened in the literal. And then there is its fuller meaning, the bigger story that nobody's wrapped their minds around yet, and that we should be able to wrap our minds around now. So it says, for if indeed he were on the earth, he would not be a priest, since there are priests who offer the gifts according to the literal earthly meaning of the Torah. All right, so he's saying he's not a Levitical priesthood, that he's not here. He's not giving up offerings. That doesn't mean he's not giving up offerings. That doesn't mean he's not doing it. He's just not doing it here because it has been transposed. It has been transferred. The instruction has been transferred. It means more than we could ever imagine, but that meaning has always been in the word. We just couldn't see it. Verse 6, I'm right here so you guys can see. But now he has obtained a more excellent, again, PDP version. He has obtained the true spiritual intent of the Torah, not just the literal, the true spiritual intent of Torah, the true and excellent service, inasmuch as he, the master, is a mediator of a better. Now, by better, what do we mean? Because, again, he's talking from literal to spiritual. So, with that definition, he is also the mediator of a better, of a spiritual hidden language. He is the mediator of that Torah, that's better covenant, which was constituted on better, not different. Because here's the problem with sort of the modern religious take on it. It's not based on something different. It's based on what already was, because he is a high priest. which already was. He is a priest, which already was. He is a sacrifice, which already was. He is the offerings, which already was. There is a temple, which already was, right? So this is not a rejection of one thing and something brand new we've never seen is here. No. This is this true spiritual intent of the Torah and has been the intent of the Torah the whole time. Verse 6 again. But now he has obtained a more excellent, a true spiritual intent of the Torah service, inasmuch as he is the mediator of a better, the spiritual hidden language of the Torah, the better covenant, which was constituted on better, not different, on better spiritual truths, which were always there hidden in the Torah, the matters, or the way it says here, the promises. Verse 7, for if the first or earthly literal example, the covenant, had been faultless, and it wasn't because it was limited by meaning and by understanding, our understanding, and by our ability, and obviously by our sin. So it's not that the first covenant was bad, it was limited because it was an example of something to come. One more time, verse 7. For if that first covenant had been faultless, because it's limited in meaning, understanding, and ability, then no place would have been sought for a second. Can you see how over and over and over and over the writers, both Messiah and the writers after him, are trying to get us to see this transposition of truth, this transposition of the Torah, this transposition of what was literal to now something that is much bigger. Not something different, just something bigger, something better, as it says here. Okay, but the problem is, the issue is that for all of us that have lived in the religious world, you've got the Gentile religion, the Gentile part of this that reads these verses in Hebrews and says, oh, that just means to reject it all, that none of it has any bearing on anything that we do. Or they either reject everything or they alter the Torah. But it's the same thing. Whether you reject it or you alter it, you're changing its meaning and thinking that there's something new or different, not connected with everything that came before. That is not true. And that causes all sorts of problems. Then you have our Jewish brethren, both from the time of Messiah all the way up till now, that they are stuck in the literal. They are stuck in the little. And if all you have is the little, the master told us, what little you have will be taken away from you. But if you have, more will be given until you have an abundance. So the earthly, they knew, they knew. And what happened to them? They had it removed. Exactly what Messiah said was going to happen, happened. And this goes beyond just the Gentile religious world and the Jewish religious world, because if we as people that we call ourselves Netzarim or the Way or Hebrew roots or Torah observant, whatever term it is that you want to put on us, if what we are doing is getting stuck on the literal and not understanding the transposition of truth from the literal to the spiritual, we're making the same mistakes that the Jews have made. And we ought to be careful of that. We ought to be very careful. And the master dealt with this. The master spoke specifically to this issue. Today, in our modern world, this is unfortunately, this is a lot of and I guess some of it has to do with until Abba sends people that have wisdom, until Abba opens up a seal, until Abba opens up eyes, until Abba gives teachers with wisdom to begin to open up these things to people. But the fact of the matter is, men love the old. And I see it all the time today. We love the letter. Here's Matthew chapter 9, verse 17, where the master explicitly tells us what the issue is going to be after the resurrection, after his time, and even up to where we are today. Matthew chapter 9, verse 17, the master says, neither do they put a new, PDP version, a spiritual wine into old or the earthly letter wineskins. Catch this. Catch what he's saying. Again, the master is speaking mysteries here. He says you cannot put the new spiritual, not the new, the renewed spiritual understanding, the truth of what it was always about, into the old earthly letter wineskins, or else the wineskins will burst and the wine is spilled out. Little you have will be removed, and the wineskins are ruined, destroyed. Wow. I mean, we look at the PDP version there. Oh my goodness, he's saying something totally different than we ever thought. But they put new wine, spiritual truth, into fresh wineskins. Those who have understanding will have in abundance. And both the wine, the literal, and the wine, the spiritual, are preserved. And they need to be preserved in us, both the literal and the spiritual. And why we certainly are not judged and move according to the literal, we must understand the literal to understand the spiritual. And that is understanding the tongue, the mystery, that it is understood. So the master spoke to the issues that we have today, because and here's sort of the deal, and I hope this makes sense, because if you look all around us, all around the religious world today, you've got a couple of different groups. And I'm sure you've all seen this. You've all saw stuff online. This is sort of the big thing now. It's among the evangelical churches. It's among the charismatic churches. It's obviously among our Jewish brethren, who are all looking towards, all believing towards the Temple Institute to build another temple. And of course, surrounding that is the whole idea of, a guy that's going to come and he's going to set up in the temple. He's going to cause the abomination. And we're going to get into all of that in much more detail later. I'm just sort of throwing it out there right now. But you hear and you see these things online. Oh, the red heifer. They finally found a red heifer, or they've got a priesthood, and they've got a high priest, and now they built a menorah, and they've got this, and they've got that, and they've got the other thing, and now they're trying to. Beloved, that's the old wine. That's the old wine, and that's looking at it for that. That's not transpositioning it. That's being stuck in the old wine, and that old wine is going to burst. And there's a lot of people, even amongst what we call the Netzarim today, that this is what they're looking for. This is their hope. We're watching these things with bated breath to see if oh my goodness, if there's a temple built and all these other, and this is the evangelicals. This is charismatic Christianity. They're all watching this. They're all waiting for this thing. They're all looking to see a new priesthood being raised up. And while they're raising up a priesthood, they're raising up lots and lots and lots and lots of money from charismatics, from evangelicals, from Jews who want a temple, because they do not understand the Mashiach has come. He has moved it from literal. He has transposed it to spiritual, based on the original, but it means something so much bigger. And whether it's the red heifer, or it's temple sacrifices, or it's the Passover sacrifice that gets done every year. And I know there's all sorts of, we were all into this. We were all mesmerized by this when we didn't know any better. But at some point, we have to open up our eyes. The idea of a third temple, of something else that's going to come. We'll talk about the third temple. We don't have time to get into it this week. We'll talk about it, I don't know if it's next week or the week after. But that whole idea of a third temple, because the third temple, from a Christian perspective, is that the anti-Messiah is going to come, the abomination of desolation is going to come. But from a Jewish perspective, the third temple is the Jewish restoration to the land, the establishment of the worship and the praise and that Abba has given to them. Beloved, and I'm saying this with respect, but I'm saying this with as much fervor as I can respectively. Both of those are an abomination. Both of those are an abomination. And here's why they are an abomination. Because if you are looking to an earthly priesthood from a Jewish perspective, you've closed your eyes to Mashiach. You have no idea what he's done. So all you have is old wine. If you're looking at this from a Christian perspective and you say you know the one who has come, you're still putting your hopes in the old wine. That this is how you have not understood the transference from the literal to the spiritual. For when there is a changing, where there is a changing of the priesthood, there is of necessity a changing or a transference, a transposition from literal to spiritual, to the bigger picture. And we just do not get that. Most people just do not get that. Here is John chapter 4. Just some words from the master, because it's if there is in any way a temple that is built that the Jews do this, that's an abomination. You're saying Messiah is not enough. The sacrifice is not enough. The Passover is not enough. Messiah is not better promises. If you are a believer, if you claim belief in the one who died and rose again, and you're looking for that temple to be all the answers, you are still saying Messiah is not enough. There is no validity in that. It has already been transferred. The move has been made from what was the example to what is the reality. Why would Abba go back to the example? All that does is nullify the sacrifice of Messiah. Here's John chapter 4, verse 12, the words of the master. The master said to the woman, "Believe me, the hour is coming when you shall neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem," i.e., the temple, worship the Father. I know that's a tough one for people to wrap their mind around, but that's the last word coming from Messiah. Worship in Jerusalem is ended until the Mashiach himself returns. Matthew chapter 24, verse 2. And Yeshua said to them, "Do you not see all these? Truly I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another at all, which shall be thrown down." He's telling us the temple, that aspect of it, that literal example, is going to be destroyed. Here's Luke chapter 19, verse 43. "Because the days shall come upon you when your enemies shall build a rampart around you and surround you and press you on all sides and dash you to the ground and your children within you. And they shall not leave in you one stone upon another," just like Matthew 24. "Because you did not know the time of your visitation." In the PDP version here, what does it mean, the time of your visitation? It means the transposition of the Torah from the letter to the spiritual. You did not recognize it. Therefore, all of these things are going to come upon you. So if they don't recognize it and they rebuild it and they do it, they are still ignoring. They are still, the very reason that the temple was destroyed is the very reason why they want to continue to do these things of the letter. And beloved, I'm just sorry, that's an abomination. Here's Hebrews chapter 10, verses 1 through 10. "For the Torah, having an earthly or literal shadow of the good spiritual hidden matters to come, and not the image itself of the matters, the hidden things of Abba, was never able to make perfect those who draw near with the same slaughter offerings which they offer continually year by year." So if a temple is built and we all put our faith in this temple, and this temple is the prophecies, and these are all the things, we are putting our faith in something that has never, ever been able to cleanse people of sin. And we are rejecting the one who has come and has washed us of our sin. Beloved, that's an abomination. That's sin in and of itself. Verse 2, "Otherwise there would not have ceased to be offered, because those who served, once cleansed, would have had no more consciousness of sin." That's if the lambs and bulls and all the rest of that worked. But in those offerings is a reminder of sins every year. That is to remind you you're in sin over and over and over again, but we're not. The Messiah has come. Verse 4. And this is it. I want to highlight this. Here it is, guys. Look at this. Look at this. This is so important. For it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sin. So if the temple is built and bulls and goats are offered, does that take away sin? Well, according to our Jewish brethren, yes. Why? Because they're still in the old wine and they are going to burst. To our Christian brethren, because they've rejected the understanding of the concept of who the Mashiach really is and the transference from the old wine to the new wine. Therefore, coming into the world, he says, slaughtering and meal offerings you did not desire. Abba never desired the offerings, never wanted those things. Those things were a teaching tool. But what he did want was a body. What was written in the stars was a coming son, a Passover lamb, a sacrifice. That you have prepared for me. Verse 6, in ascending offerings and offerings for sin, you did not delight, because they are just earthly examples of a spiritual truth. I know I'm getting a little excited here, but this is really, really big stuff that people we've got to get this. We've got to get this because we've got all sorts of groups talking about this stuff in the temple, and we're missing the point. Verse 7, he goes on to say, then I said, see, I come in the roll, in the content of the law and the prophets of the book. It is written concerning me, the Passover lamb, to do your desire, to do your spiritual will, O Elohim, saying above, slaughter and meal offerings and ascending offerings and offerings of sin you did not desire, nor delighted in, which are offered according to the letter, the earthly example of the Torah. Then he said, see, I come to do your hidden mystery tongue, your will, your hidden matters, the desire, O Elohim. Here it is. He takes away the first, the temple, the earthly example, not one stone upon another, to establish the spiritual truth of the Torah. The second, another temple. And we'll get into that next week as to what temple we are actually talking about, because this is connected to Ezekiel. It's connected to all sorts of verses, the whole idea of it. Because people say, well, what about the third temple? Ezekiel talks about the third temple. Well, it doesn't mean what everybody thinks it means, because people do not realize that we have transferred from an earthly to a spiritual reality. And so we'll get into that. We'll get into that certainly next time. I've run out of time already for today. This is just the introduction. We're going to get more and more into this. Got so much to talk about the pattern of the temple and what it really means. What is the transference? What are the definitions? How are we? And it's going to help you understand really the whole story and hopefully put all of this together for everybody. I hope that you guys enjoyed that for tonight. I know a lot of scriptures, but it's always a lot of scriptures here. Go over it again, listen to it again, download the notes when they are available. I invite you guys to do that. Got lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff. Let me just do this right here. Just send some love out to you guys. There we go. You guys can hopefully see that up there. Got lots of love coming out to you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. I appreciate that. Guys, don't forget to join us tomorrow morning for our morning manna, and of course Friday night. We're going to continue talking about this idea of the temple, because there's so many different aspects to this and who we are. So Brother Max and I, we're going to continue this conversation. And of course, join us this weekend as we talk about truth, lies, and murder this upcoming weekend, as we continue just to put all of this together and really sort of wrap our minds around the entire story. Guys, I hope that you enjoyed that. I hope I didn't go too fast for you guys. I'm trying to get this in at a certain amount of time, but I hope that you guys enjoyed that. Guys, have a wonderful night out there. Don't forget, please subscribe. I appreciate that. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. Be part of LMC. Download our app. Guys, Yah bless. Shalom.